Hello and welcome to the webinar, Protect Your Bottom Line, Chargeback Insights and ARC Risk Check. Before we get started, let's do some quick introductions. My name is Cornelius Hattingh. I'm the Director of Revenue Integrity, Compliance and Accreditation at ARC. And presenting with me today is...
Hello, my name is Maarten Alleman. I'm the CEO of Perseuss.
All right, thank you for that, Maarten. Let's get started. Chargebacks cost travel agencies far more than the disputed transaction alone. From lost revenue and additional fees to reputational damage and strained supplier relationship, the downstream impact can ripple across the entire travel ecosystem. In this session, we'll unpack the cost of chargebacks in the travel industry and explore their hidden consequences. We'll also introduce you to ARC Risk Check, powered by Perseuss, a tool that helps agents and airlines identify and prevent fraudulent transactions before they become those costly chargebacks. So let's look at what sits behind chargebacks and especially the debit memos. So when a ticket is issued through a global distribution system like Amadeus, Sabre, or Travelport, and processed under either the IATA's BSP or ARC's environment, the airline is considered the merchant of record. I'm sure you all know this already, but I thought I'd bring it up again because it's very important to know who takes on the responsibility ultimately. Although that initial chargeback is being absorbed by the merchant of record, the airline, they have the ability to pass that on to you. So the airline will, as I mentioned, absorb that initial chargeback, but then raise a debit memo for the full amount of the ticket. Plus, if needed, they will apply penalties and additional fees for the need to process that debit memo. This can include a couple of things, but will always be the full ticket value, a chargeback handling fee. This could range from anything from $25 to $100, depending on the airline, plus additional administrative penalties if needed. So in short, when a chargeback happens, it doesn't stop with the airline. The financial liability rolls back to the agency, which is why understanding and preventing chargebacks is critical to protecting your bottom line. In ARC's industry agency handbook, we maintain clear best practices of card acceptance and risk management to help guide you how to make informed decisions about payment card acceptance. It also speaks to terms and conditions that you need to be applying in what you have as customer facing, and other steps and processes that you could follow to safeguard yourself against potential chargebacks. So now let's look and talk about penalty fees, specifically how they can appear in the airline agency contracts when chargebacks become excessive. Some airlines agreements include very specific terms tied to an agency's chargeback ratio. If an agent's chargeback exceeds a certain threshold, say more than 0.5% of total sales, that can trigger additional penalties. And those penalties may include a range of consequences, such as increased per case fees. So they may raise the standard fee for each chargeback incident, loss of commission overrides. So agencies may lose bonus commissions or performance-based incentives, withholding of future commissions, and even the suspension of or termination of your ticketing authority for a particular airline. In both ARC in the US and the BSPs, the airlines have access to debit memos, and especially the agency memo manager environment, where they can process these chargebacks as debit memos to you and assess those fees. So as we mentioned already, although the chargeback could be seen as the ticket value itself, there are potential for additional hidden costs associated with that. And that is what really gets to hurt the bottom line of the travel agent. And that's what we're looking at here next. And that is sort of where we start looking at the fraud multiplier tool as well. So we know and understand that there's the initial chargeback value plus the initial fees and additional penalties that might be applied. But in order to assess the true cost of a chargeback, this multiplier comes into play. So the multiplier is expressed in a ratio of 2 to 4 times or 3.75 times the actual value. So what that means is for every $1 loss to fraud, the total loss, once you include all the hidden costs, could be doubled or tripled in these situations. So for instance, if you had a $500 chargeback, that might in reality cost you nearly $700 to $1,000 to resolve that debit memo. Just bear in mind that you also lose any effort for your sale of that initial ticket, any marketing that you would have done, etc. That is all effort and hidden costs that you are losing out on because of that chargeback. So considering these costs, which impact both the airlines and the agencies, ARC proactively monitors transaction patterns across the industry and sends out what we call our risk alerts. Now, these risk alerts are intended to notify the agencies when there's a potential issue, whether that's known fraud, suspicious ticketing activity, or a compromised card pattern that we identify, or even travelers on a negative list that we have. These alerts are designed to give agencies early visibility so they can take quick action before a transaction becomes a chargeback or results in a debit memo. ARC sends out on average about 60 to 100 alerts per month to impacted agencies, and for the month of October, the total dollar value of those alerts were around $500,000. So applying the fraud multiplier to that, if the actions weren't taken on those transactions, that could have doubled. So you probably could have had a loss there of over $1 million applying the fraud multiplier logic. So building on that same philosophy of prevention with Perseuss to establish ARC Risk Check, a real-time solution that helps agencies assess risk before a ticket is issued. And the reason for that is that ARC's data, and when we get our data, we are sitting at about 24 hours behind on how that data is flowing into our system. So applying ARC Risk Check at the front end, at the point of sale, you're in a much better position to take positive action against those potential fraudulent transactions because you have more time, you have the 24-hour void window, and you can take the necessary action in scoring and understanding where that transaction is coming from. So I'm going to hand over here to Maarten, who's going to dig in a little bit and show you how ARC Risk Check works on Perseuss platform. So over to Maarten.
Cornelius, thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit on the ARC Risk Check and the Perseuss community that's behind the ARC Risk Check. So the Perseuss community is a community of people that are working in fraud prevention and believe that fighting fraud together by using combined intelligence of all merchants is a very powerful tool to identify fraudsters that are defrauding multiple companies. So the way that we do that is by a global database of cross-vertical fraud intelligence, which means that we have fraud cases, reported fraud cases by airlines, travel agents, and other merchants that report any fraudulent activity they see to the Perseuss system and allow other members of the Perseuss community to benefit from the data in their day-to-day fraud prevention efforts. So how does that work in practice? He shops at company A, and it turns out that transaction was actually a fraudulent transaction. That company will report the transaction to Perseuss, and will add any relevant data points to the Perseuss database. This can be the email, the IP, the physical address entered, and other relevant metadata for other members in our community. Then the same fraudster goes and tries to shop at company B or C, but because they are also connected to Perseuss, they will ask the Perseuss community if this person is seen before by other members of the community and report as fraudulent. In this case, because company A already reported this shopper, Perseuss will report back to the companies that yes, this is a high-risk transaction because actually this person is known to be a fraudster, and most of the times the companies then will decide to block the transaction and not accept the purchase. So let me give you a more concrete example on how this works. Meet John. So John is a customer that is trying to book, but how likely is it that John is not an honest customer? Because if you see this customer for the first time, you don't know anything about the customer. You have to, well, basically decide for yourself whether this is a risky transaction or not. Well, for a transaction like this, you can go to the ARC risk check and use the Perseuss risk score. And the Perseuss risk score works in a way that we combine the data of all the members. And so we combine all the transactions and search for patterns within those transactions. So was this in before by multiple Apple companies to try to commit fraud? Was this passenger name known before? And other fields that are relevant to identify the fraud group that's trying to defraud you. And the Perseuss risk score has a score from 0 to 100, where 0 is very low risk and 100 is very high risk. And anything in between can be used by you to determine whether you want to do more investigation, block the transaction, or accept the transaction. So for instance, when it's a very low score, most likely you should be able to accept the transaction. If it's a very high score, most of the times it would be wise to either block the transaction or steer the customer to a different payment method that doesn't have a risk associated to it. So our John that we were trying to investigate before is actually part of one of our fraud clusters. So you can see that the phone number used, the address used, the email address used were part of a fraud cluster that was seen within the platform before. And that means that the platform will return a high risk score. So this is probably fraud because this is a 97 as a score, and that indicates that it's very high risk. What you can do while investigating even further is look at the individual fields as well. So why is this a high risk score? Well, it's because the email address was seen before, the IP address was seen before, the customer name was seen before and reported as fraud. So looking at this, you probably can determine whether you want to accept this transaction or not. So what do we do now? With the Perseuss score that you have received, you can either block the transaction, or perform an in-depth manual review. And that in-depth manual review might mean that you try to get more information to make sure that this is not a fraudulent transaction. So how can you use Perseuss? There's 3 ways to use Perseuss. One is through a direct API integration. This is something that's been used by larger companies that have their own fraud prevention measures already in place. They can directly integrate our APIs and use our score as part of their own scoring model. The second way is through your payment service provider. A lot of payment service providers use our APIs as well to enhance their own fraud scoring. And the third way is the manual review option that we just did for John, where you log on to the platform, you enter the details that you have, and a score will be returned. So the Perseuss, sorry.
If I can just add something here, Maarten, is about the data being shared and how the information is coming through. I think that is the ARC risk alert that we send out to the customers. Having you respond to those risk alerts and confirming them as being fraud helps us to support this environment as well, because once a week we will load all of the negative data that we have confirmation on back into the Perseuss environment. So there's always a refresh and always new data from what ARC sends, but of course there's multiple merchants that are also contributing to this environment. So the more information that's being fed into this, the richer the data is and the more accurate the scores are. But I just wanted to add there that the risk alerts that ARC sends out, we really need you to collaborate with us in that as a travel agency and confirm back that there were fraud and the actions that you've taken, so you can use and take that information and put it back into the community.
Thank you. So Perseuss works with a lot of industry partners. So we've been around for almost 15 years, and we're working with ARC Risk Check, but also IATA. Our system is called IATA Perseuss for the airlines. We're working with law enforcement that's also benefiting from the data in a more anonymized way, but they're also providing data to our platform to help the community to identify fraud better. And of course, there's a lot of payment service providers and free fraud screening providers that are linked to our systems as well. If you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out. We have members worldwide. So throughout the world, there are airlines and travel agents using the platform for fraud prevention. And this results in almost 10,000 new fraud cases reported on a weekly basis to our platform. So that indicates that there's a lot of activity on the platform. There's a lot of fraud happening worldwide as well. But it also means that you can really benefit from all this data, and you should be able to prevent fraud cases that happen to others to happen to you as well. So how to use the ARC Risk Check? It's a very easy logon. So you can request an account through the ARC website. As soon as you have an account, you can log on, and then it's a very simple process because you get a very simple form with all the fields that you can fill in, and only the fields that you have you use. If something is not available, you don't have to enter it. And the result of this very simple form will be our score, with the option to deep dive into the details and actually understand why this transaction was reported as potential fraud. And if you really want to even become part of the community and talk to the other members and ask for help to understand how to prevent this fraud. And I think that's a very important element of the Perseuss and ARC Risk Check community as well, that it's not just a tool, it's also a community. You can reach out to the airlines. They will respond because you're part of the Perseuss community. If you have a fraud case, they will help you. And the same goes for the industry partners that are using the system. And if you're interested in a trial, please go to arccorp.com/products. There you can subscribe, and we're happy to help and to give you a proper training to understand how to use the system.
Perfect. So we've got a couple of questions that have come in that I'll put forward. The first one is, is Perseuss connected to Arc or is it on its own platform? Well, I can answer it, but if you want to take it on.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, Perseuss is separate from Arc. We've partnered with Perseuss, and we will take on any application for the tool, etc., via our website. But the platform and the Perseuss tool itself is managed by the Perseuss team and is a separate environment from Arc. Then we've got the next question asking, is the Perseuss website free and how do we enroll? Okay, I can take this one as well. So the Perseuss tool, the manual check piece, is available at $30 a month for 30 checks per month. So you can do 30 requests per month, and it's for one user. So if you have one user, depending on your volume and so on, this is a good plan to start at. It's $30 a month. You can do 30 requests and checks in that space, and you will have one user that access that. Intent here is really for you to use it for new customers. I know a lot of agencies have a known customer base that's loyal to you, and so on. But if you are looking to expand and grow your business and you want to mitigate your risk, this is a good place to start with doing so. The plans expand from there, and you can get a second plan. It's called Plus. That's about $60 a month for 120 checks, and that gives you 2 users. Then it goes to Premium, which is about $100 a month, allows you 300 checks per month, and you have 5 users that use it. This is all the manual environment where you can go self-check and self-manage to get that score in line with what Maarten presented to you. Then, of course, for anything that's over 300 transactions, you want to start considering that API. And so there's an opportunity for you to also request that via the arccorp.com under products, go to Arc Risk Check, and you can find all of that information there, and also how to request access for the API. Maarten, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you covered it completely.
Cool. Then we have another question in, and I'll just read the whole thing. We've seen an increase in chargebacks recently, and it's not because of fraud, but simply because the travelers do not recognize the transactions on their statement, or they just did not like how their flight was, and then complain, and then not getting any resolve, I assume, and then they raise a chargeback with the bank. The bank's sides with the customer, and the travel agency is left with that chargeback. The best things to do in these situations is really to ensure that your terms and conditions are clear to the customer, and what you will accept as or what to expect from a service level perspective. Also refer them to the airline's terms and conditions if you can. In the instance where you have a statement concern, make sure you clearly communicate with the customer what to expect on their statements. So if you are processing through a different payment provider and they are going to be representing either themselves or a naming convention on the statement that might not make the connection for the customer, make sure you communicate to the customer that they will see in specifics what they will see in their statements. Therefore, you've clear the path basically to let them know what to expect in their statement, and so therefore you can point them back to that point them back to what was the expectation there on their statement. You can also then use that information to dispute your chargebacks, and we always recommend that you, if you do have a chargeback, is to dispute them and or find a solution to work with them. And all of your T's and C's and all of your communications with the customer becomes evidence for you that can support you in your effort to fight that chargeback. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, ARC has some best practices and some additional guidance for you in our IEH environment. So I recommend you look at that as well in order to set up a more robust environment and all these T's and C's that can support you with your customers. So let me go back into the presentation and talk a little bit about two things that we have at ARC, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the naming convention is so close to each other. One is ARC check, and the other is ARC risk check, which we've just reviewed here with Perseuss. So the difference really is between the two. One is a verification tool to confirm and validate that a travel agency is ARC accredited. So if you are planning to do business with other agencies, this is a good place to come and check and validate that those travel agencies are in good standing with ARC and confirm that they are accredited. We have seen in the past that many agencies represent themselves as ARC accredited, but in fact are not. So it's always a good place to come and double check and ensure that if you are planning to do business with someone, that you do an ARC check and validate that who you're planning to do business with is truly who they say they are. And then of course, ARC risk check is the fraud intelligence solution, which we've just reviewed here. So complementary environments, but two very different end results, if you want to call it so. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. And so just for your information, here are ways you can contact us. Of course, we have a stopfraud@arccorp.com email, and we ask that you use that. So anytime you identify a fraud or have concerns with anything, please communicate that to us. We do review all those emails that come in. We also use the data that you share with us to try and monitor for anything that we could validate and confirm. Of course, we have the ARC risk check website there as well, plus your access to the Perseuss website should you need it. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you everyone for participating, and thank you, Maarten.
Thank you.